With 14 candidates in the running for Conservative Party leader, it's been hard for both members and the candidates to see how they differentiate themselves from one another. Sure, Kevin O'Leary has his celebrity status, Kelly Leitch has her Canadian Values campaign, and Mad Maxime Bernier has been pumping out policy position after policy position for almost a year now. But what about the other 11? What can Canadians and Conservatives expect from them? Well, for one candidate, their service in the military and military policy going forward could be something that they find resonates with Conservatives. And that candidate is Erin O'Toole. Mr. O'Toole is the only candidate to have served in the Canadian Forces, and recently he's been exploring an enhanced CANZUK agreement, a freedom of movement, trade, and political cooperation between Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. I caught up with Mr. O'Toole after the Vancouver debate over the weekend, and here is what he had to tell me about his exciting idea and his commitment to our armed forces.
Erin, we just wrapped up a debate here in Vancouver. Obviously, we've got a lot of candidates in the race. I want to talk about a couple things that differentiate you from the rest. The first is this CANZUK idea of free travel, free work, basically free trade between Anglophone countries, New Zealand, Australia, United Kingdom, and Canada. Tell our viewers a little bit more about that and what Canadians could expect to see under Prime Minister O'Toole.
Well, CANZUK is a movement that I've embraced, and the term comes from a term that was used in diplomatic circles because Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom always voted the same way. Why? Because we have shared history, shared rule of law, shared parliamentary systems, the Queen. We trade together, our countries are developed. So why aren't we doing more as countries together? We have the Five Eyes security relationship, which also includes the U.S., but we already have free trade with the U.S. We have ease of mobility for our citizens with the U.S. We should have this same degree of integration with our other best allies, and that's the Commonwealth members in CANZUK, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand. There's so many person-to-person ties as well. I put it out in my policy, and people have been very excited by it, particularly young people, so I'm pleased to talk about it.
Absolutely. I think it's something that is sort of a unique idea that we haven't really heard a lot from. Curious, though, is that an agreement that would be negotiated by all the parties? Would it include free trade between the four nations?
It would. You know, look, after Brexit, the UK is going to be pulling out of the European Trade Agreement. And I was working on the European Trade Agreement in the Harper government. I was the parliamentary secretary. So we need to make sure we secure a relationship with Britain, for sure. Why would we not also do it with those other countries that are similarly aligned, similar economies, rule of law? We were in TPP discussions with New Zealand and Australia, so we've kind of danced around this for decades, really. Let's get it done. And me putting it out there has not just led to interest from young people from across Canada. I've gotten interest from the United Kingdom, from Australia, New Zealand. I know some politicians are looking at it. This is something I would want to negotiate in the first term of an O'Toole government.
That's really great to hear. I want to move into something else that you're quite well versed on. You're a military man yourself, the only candidate I will mention that has military experience. Obviously, we're seeing pressure now from Secretary Mattis and the Trump administration to get those NATO allies up to 2% GDP. You have a time frame for that, and do you think that is something that Canada absolutely must commit to no matter who is the leader going forward?
Absolutely. I would commit in year one of my government to make a target to meet the 2% NATO deadline or the NATO commitment. I actually released my policy on this the day before President Trump started saying, look, most of the countries in NATO are free riders. They're not meeting their commitment. So as a founding nation, we have to make that. Now, it's doubling our defense commitment, so it will be done over a 10-year or so span. And I've already highlighted where I would see the money being spent. Rebuilding the reserves and their infrastructure from coast to coast, rebuilding our support in the Arctic, finishing that naval station and port in the north that Prime Minister Harper had started a move towards, rebuilding the reserves in the Yukon that Pierre Trudeau canceled. I'd also build it into cyber security and cyber warfare. I want Canada to be a NATO center of excellence for cyber warfare. Why? Because it will help our institutions, our government, but it'll trickle into the economy with high-tech jobs.
Let's talk about a couple issues regarding procurement in armed forces. The first is the shipbuilding program that Stephen Harper outlined, the last government. We've seen varied success on the C-SPAN side and the non-naval military vessels. However, we've sort of seen some uncertainty surrounding whether our military ships are going to be built here in Canada. Do you have a preference that we procure all our ships, all our resources from here in Canada, or are you willing to let maybe someone like the South Koreans, who build ships better than anyone, take the lead on that?
Well, great question, and here's actually the opportunity of CANZUK. Why would we not work with Australia and New Zealand, similar Navy, similar background, to have them buy our ships so that we don't go from feast to famine in between cycles? And you know what? our new submarine, maybe we should buy the Collins class that the Australians have been working on. If we get the smaller partners in the Five Eyes to start doing procurement together, relying on each other, and New Zealand can do some electronics and some of the support work for these contracts, the Seaspan shipyard will be refurbishing a New Zealand frigate, a Kiwi frigate. So let's make this institutionalized. Our challenge has been our shipyards in Vancouver and in Halifax get ramped up and then go back down for a generation. We need to keep that constant, and I think working more with the CANZUK partners would be part of that. I am proud the fact that our shipbuilding program under Harper led to over $100 million in private sector investment here in Seaspan in Vancouver. So there's the growing pains with it, but that's because we go in these feast to famine cycles. CANZUK and working with our allies would help avoid that.
That sounds like a great idea. Moving to another one, the F-35. Justin Trudeau has indicated that he wants to see the Super Hornet bought from Boeing. Lots of reports out there that we may only use it for a very short period of time. Also, President Trump yesterday talking in his rally in Florida, suggesting that he was negotiating on behalf of other F-35 partners like Canada to get that price down. What do you make of all of that?
It shows the Liberals once again have zero respect for the men and women of our military. I was a Sea King helicopter navigator. The Chrétien government canceled the Sea King, blew $500 million of money, and we still needed equipment for our men and women. This stopgap measure of the Super Hornet is not needed. We have the F-18 that will work till 2025. We have no need for a capability gap. So the Liberals are misleading Canadians. They're going to waste billions of dollars, and we still will have a 1990s aircraft that we need to fly in 2040. Let's do this right. My defense plan also says I'll overhaul and fix procurement. The Australians do it better than we do. Let's depoliticize it, take it out of public works, do it quickly, nimbly, and get the men and women what we need.
And for the record, where do you stand on the F-35 program? Are you a backer of it, or are you willing to just look at it? Do you think it needs a review?
I'm a supporter of the F-35 program. Why? Because we've already had $1 billion of economic activity just from being part of the consortium. In fact, Jean Chrétien signed us onto the consortium. My brother-in-law is an Australian. He flew as part of the Australian F-18s and their participation in the consortium. It's a good win. I think we could do a quick RFP confirmation like some countries have done to show the value for money. But when our allies like Israel and others are already purchasing it and they have frontline defense needs, I think it shows we need the fighter, not just for today, but for 40 years from now that we can fly with our allies.
Before we wrap up, Aaron, anything that that we didn't talk about today, whether it be an economic proposal, a social proposal, or something that you think is in the hearts and minds of conservative voters that are thinking about marking their ballot for you, that they need to know going into the leadership election in May?
I think the big one, and I hear it whether I'm in BC or in Ontario, is the carbon tax. You know, the Trudeau carbon tax, I've said I will eliminate as Conservative leader and Prime Minister. It's not going to have any impact in the way they think on the environment, and it's forcing seniors on fixed income, young families already struggling with higher costs to pay for something when they're not the problem. So I would reverse that immediately, and it doesn't really matter where I am. I hear that from regular Canadians saying we can't afford more taxes, Mr. Trudeau. So we have to listen, and I think the Conservatives have shown we will get taxes back down.
Aaron O'Toole, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
So what did you think of that? I love that Mr. O'Toole is a military guy because, as we know, liberal times aren't just tough times for all Canadians, but especially hard on our servicemen and women. Getting back to 2% GDP spending on defense is absolutely needed if we were to defend our sovereignty, and I think the CANZUK idea is one that has a mass populist appeal for a youth that may have been Trudeau voters last time around. Regardless of who wins this race, I think these are ideas and concepts that have to be a part of the platform for the Conservatives in 2019, no matter what. For the Rebel.media, I'm Christopher Wilson. Thanks for watching. You know, we're covering this CPC leadership race like no one else, so make sure you never miss a video. Click subscribe on our YouTube channel.